This is SteamDeck, not the most powerful console out there running PC games, but the power of this console is in its community and the fact that LCD version and OLED version are literally the same dimensions, meaning that all of the accessories for LCD version will go to the OLED version since they are the same in all the dimensions. But we will not be talking about only hardware here, but also interesting software which was released and developed specifically for the Steam Deck. And starting with the lossless scaling, $8 application on Steam, and of course it will not run by itself. You need also an add-on which was developed specifically for the Steam Deck and which you can download absolutely for free, which will allow you to have decent frame generation on the Steam Deck, which will run the same Cyberpunk in very smooth 60 FPS with close to none input lag. For that, you will need to have this application which costs $8, and by the way, you can run it on your PC as well, free add-on and Decky, another add-on which allows you to get another add-ons for the Steam Deck. The usage is pretty simple. All you need is to have the application, to have an add-on, and all you have to do is to copy a specific command line and add it to the properties of the game you want to run lossless scaling on. In my case, that would be Cyberpunk. And Cyberpunk works with the lossless scaling simply amazingly since you can have 60 FPS on the Steam Deck with close to none problems related to frame generation and upscaling. And the next thing from the hardware, it would be the case. Of course, Steam Deck comes in a case from the box, but as you can see, it's really bulky, so you can get a slim case specifically for the Steam Deck in order to transport it in the same backpack, and it would take much less space. As I can tell you from my experience, original case is drop-proof, is shock-proof, and is really decent, especially for something that comes out of the box. But the thing is that the slim case takes much less space and also is some sort of shockproof. And let's be honest, you will not be dropping your Steam Deck even in the original case, so this case, which costed me around $20 from Amazon, is very worth buying. And now going to another hardware accessories. Of course, Steam Deck also can have Steam Deck Dock, which costs around $80 to $90 on the Steam official site, but for what you will be paying $80 to $90, that would be just a USB Type-C hub. So you can get a generic one, as for example this one from Ugreen, which will allow you to have 2 USB Type-A ports, 2 USB Type-C ports, HDMI and Ethernet, essentially all you need, and of course it would have the 90 degrees adapter specifically for the Steam Deck, or to be honest, to any other console. And this dock costs not $80, not $90, but $25. And the next thing which I really enjoyed was the grips for the sticks on the Steam Deck. Of course, it's a really controversial thing to have these grips, but for me, to be honest, it gave more control. Of course, in case of Steam Deck, you will be covering the sensor which is in the sticks, which you will be using in case of using the gyroscope, for example, in such games as Spider-Man, where you can aim using gyroscope, but let's be honest, I suppose that you maybe didn't even know that the Steam Deck has sensors in these sticks. And at the same time, it prevents the wear and tear of the original sticks, gives you control, and gives you pretty nice feelings when using these sticks. Of course, you can buy up to 16 this type of grips in different colors, and you can put it on literally every controller you can think of. For example, I have these grips on my Steam Deck, on my DualSense and on my Xbox controller. And all of that for the price of $9 from Amazon. And now we will be entering the free zone. The free zone, which will give you lots of interesting software, which will give you great experience from your Steam Deck, especially if you have used it for quite a while. So number 1 in my personal list is Steam Deck Volume Booster. For that, the same as with the lossless scaling, you're gonna need Decky, but the Volume Booster essentially allows you to boost the volume of the speakers in the Steam Deck itself up to 150%. In my personal opinion, the speakers in the Steam Deck OLED are great, but not as powerful as I'd prefer. So I have put the volume booster up to 110%, and that's more than enough for me for the loudness of the speakers. And going next, that will be CSS Loader. CSS Loader allows you to customize your Steam Deck in the personalization and visual plan however you'd like. There is lots of interesting applications for the CSS Loader, since it allows you to make the icon smaller, to make the card bigger, and to add different types of styles and animations depending on what you'd like. The next thing is gonna be radio, the internet radio which you can play while gaming. For example, I use this internet radio in case when I'm playing such a thing as Death Stranding. Originally it was meant as, I suppose, as a meditation of some sort, but I prefer to listen to online radio since it gives you pretty interesting feeling of really walking and to hear something going on the background and not just some ambient noise. And the next thing is Magic Pods. In case you have Apple AirPods or Samsung Galaxy Buds and you want to connect it to the Steam Deck, of course you can do that, but you won't be able to see the battery right away of your buds. So that's where Magic Pods comes into the scene. It works with AirPods, as said before, Samsung Buds, and shows you battery and allows you to choose noise cancellation from the Steam Deck itself. And last but not least is going to be, of course, SteamDeck. SteamDeck is a great add-on for such thing as emulation of old games, and by the way, if you will go far enough into the deeps of the internet, you can find even emulator of Nintendo Switch, allowing you, just wait, to play such things as Zelda on your Steam Deck OLED, while others will be playing it on Nintendo Switch 1 and 2, which won't have OLED screen. Of course, in case of the first, it will have OLED screen, it may have OLED screen, but the problem there is completely different, it's not as powerful as the same Steam Deck. And that's not all, but for now, that's everything you need to know in case of customization. Thank you for joining in, and I really hope you to see here next time.